I think there were not many people who understood just how broad his interests were and how supportive he was of an astonishingly wide range of organisations.
The appointment was prepared. The private papers had been arranged. King Charles believed only one final signature stood between Camilla's son and one of the most influential non-royal positions inside the palace. Then Princess Anne entered the room, placed her hand over the document, and delivered a warning no one expected. The king could not make this decision alone, and she would not allow him to proceed without formal council approval. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Charles sat behind the desk with the appointment warrant beneath his hand, certain he was offering Tom Parker Bowles an opportunity rather than a private favor. The warrant was the formal paper authorizing the appointment, and it would make Tom senior advisor for royal hospitality and cultural affairs. That position carried access to official residences, ceremonial planning meetings, royal hosting budgets, and sensitive internal schedules. It mattered because a non-royal relative would stand close to decisions involving public money and government-linked guests. Anne stepped forward and asked one question. Had the Royal Council seen the proposal? The council was the senior review body expected to examine household appointments before they became official. Charles hesitated. His silence gave her the answer. The appointment had been prepared as a direct royal choice, avoiding the review normally used to test authority, funding, security access, and conflicts of interest. The Princess Royal felt betrayed. She was not objecting because Tom was Camilla's son. She was objecting because her brother appeared ready to bend the rules for someone connected to the Queen. Charles heard accusation rather than warning. He insisted that the sovereign had the right to choose trusted advisors. Anne answered that royal trust could not replace public safeguards. Anne placed a closed red folder beside the unsigned warrant. She explained that 3 senior advisors had submitted objections through confidential council memoranda. One challenged the role's sweeping authority. Another questioned its budget. The third demanded to know why no independent candidate had been considered. Charles looked from the folder to his sister, and the confidence in his face began to disappear. The king reached for his pen. Anne rested 2 fingers on the edge of the warrant and spoke with controlled force. Signing before review, she warned, could create a constitutional crisis inside the household and a public scandal outside it. Charles slowly set the pen down. The clock continued. Neither sibling moved. Camilla still knew nothing. But before she could confront Anne, the palace had to reckon with the people trapped inside the decision, and with what each of them believed they were entitled to protect. Behind the sealed doors, this was not simply a disagreement about employment. For Charles, it was a test of his freedom as king. For Camilla, it was a judgment on her family. For Anne, it was a defense of rules she believed had already been stretched too far. And for Tom, waiting outside the center of power, the promised appointment had become something more dangerous than a promotion. It had become proof of whether he truly belonged. Charles felt trapped between the authority he carried and the loyalty he believed he owed. The sovereign, meaning the reigning monarch responsible for leading the institution, was expected to choose advisors he trusted. He argued that hospitality, cultural patronage, and public engagement required practical judgment, not only years of palace service. To him, Tom offered experience the household lacked. Yet the king also knew the appointment involved access, money, and influence, making every personal connection impossible to ignore. Anne saw the danger differently. She had spent decades watching private wishes collide with public duty, and she believed precedent existed to stop affection from becoming authority. The Princess Royal, the traditional title given to the monarch's eldest daughter, had built her reputation on discipline rather than comfort. She did not consider Tom unworthy. She considered the process unworthy of the crown. Camilla received the message without warning. The warrant had been temporarily withheld. A warrant was the formal document that would authorize the role and make it official. She read the words twice in her private sitting room, then folded the paper with slow care. Humiliation came first. Anger followed. The Queen had believed Charles's promise was secure, and now she understood that someone inside the family had challenged it before she had even been consulted. Tom faced the consequences moments later. A palace secretary informed him that his introductory meeting had disappeared from the schedule and that further briefings were postponed. He forced a polite smile until the official left. Then he remained beside an unopened briefing case, realizing the position may have been offered long before anyone had gained the right to offer it. Charles had discussed the plan with Camilla weeks earlier. In that private conversation, he described it as a way to bring practical experience into the royal household, the staff and departments supporting the monarch's official duties. Anne had never been included. Worse still, she now learned that office space had already been identified and a draft security pass prepared for Tom. William met Anne outside a private corridor and noticed the red council folder beneath her arm. The prince asked what had happened. She gave him only one sentence. "Your father is asking the crown to absorb a family decision." His expression tightened, because he understood the cost of that distinction. The deeper Anne looked, the clearer the truth became. This appointment had not begun with one document. It had begun with a specific palace failure, an incident Charles never forgot, and Camilla quietly turned into an opportunity. To understand why the king pushed so forcefully, the story must return to the evening when a minor ceremonial mistake became the excuse for a far greater transfer of power. The appointment had not emerged from nowhere. Its true origin lay 3 months earlier, during a diplomatic banquet at St. James's Palace, when a seating error placed a visiting cultural minister beside the wrong royal host and delayed the receiving line by 11 minutes. The mistake was small enough to disappear from public memory. Inside the palace, however, Charles treated it as evidence of something far larger, and Camilla saw an opening no one else recognized. Charles entered the St. James's Cultural Partnership banquet expecting precision. The formal gathering, designed to connect foreign cultural leaders with the royal household, depended on rank, timing, and carefully assigned places. Yet 2 guests had been given the same ceremonial seat, after separate palace departments issued conflicting instructions. The king watched confusion spread before foreign delegates, and every delayed introduction felt like a public wound to the authority he was meant to represent. Tom Parker Bowles had attended privately as Camilla's guest, not as an official advisor. He recognized the problem, spoke quietly with the event staff, shifted one table assignment, and reorganized the affected guests without creating further embarrassment. Tom understood food, public events, and powerful personalities. Within minutes, the receiving line moved again, and Charles noticed exactly who had restored order when trained officials had failed. Charles confronted the Lord Chamberlain after the final guest departed. The senior court officer, responsible for coordinating major palace ceremonies and household departments, tried to explain that 2 approved seating charts had reached the staff. The king struck one finger against the page and demanded to know how such a basic mistake survived every check. The Lord Chamberlain offered to begin an internal review, but the monarch's frustration had already moved beyond that single banquet. Camilla found Tom preparing to leave and thanked him with unmistakable pride. He did not accept the praise easily. Tom told his mother that he had corrected a problem he was never officially meant to handle, and he had no wish to become the convenient answer whenever palace systems failed. The queen heard reluctance in his voice, but she also saw proof that he could succeed where others had stumbled. Camilla approached Charles later that night with careful words. She said the royal household, the staff, and departments supporting the sovereign's official work needed someone who understood modern hospitality without becoming trapped in old rivalries. She did not mention Tom by name at first. She did not need to. The king knew whom she meant, and she knew the idea had already taken hold. Charles requested a confidential outline 2 days later. He ordered officials to design a senior cultural and hospitality position marked as a sovereign appointment, meaning the monarch could select the candidate directly instead of holding an open competition. That choice reduced scrutiny, protected speed, and quietly placed Tom at the front of a race no one else knew had begun. Anne eventually found the original banquet report inside the council file. Beside the written account of Tom's intervention, Charles had added one sentence: "This is the judgment we are missing." The Princess Royal closed the document slowly. She had found the moment when gratitude became intention, and when one successful evening began turning into permanent authority. The banquet explained Charles's determination, but it could not excuse the secrecy that followed. When Anne finally faced the king and Camilla without secretaries, folders, or careful messages between them, the dispute erupted into the most personal confrontation of the crisis. Camilla entered expecting an explanation. Charles expected his sister to soften. Anne did neither. With the disputed warrant lying between them, the Princess Royal told the Queen that palace service could not become an extension of private family loyalty. Camilla's face hardened. Charles rose from his chair, and within moments, a conversation intended to calm the crisis exposed years of resentment over influence, acceptance, and who possessed the right to draw boundaries around the crown. Charles had arranged the meeting inside a private Windsor sitting room because he believed family could settle what officials had complicated. Windsor was more than a royal residence. It was a working center of monarchy where private family life often collided with official duty. No aides were present, no secretaries waited to soften the language. The king wanted discretion, but the silence only made every accusation sharper. Anne arrived carrying the appointment draft and the written council objections. The council was the senior body expected to examine powerful household decisions before they became official. Camilla entered moments later, already knowing exactly who had stopped the signature. She did not sit immediately. She looked at her sister-in-law and asked whether Tom had ever been given a fair chance. Camilla accused Anne of treating her son as permanently unsuitable, simply because he belonged to her family. The Queen's voice remained controlled, but the hurt beneath it was unmistakable. She had spent years watching those closest to her remain outside the royal circle, and now she believed the same judgment was being passed again. Anne refused to retreat. She said the issue was not Tom's birth. It was the creation of a powerful office around one person before anyone else had been allowed to compete. Charles stepped between them. He told his sister she had crossed a line by obstructing the sovereign's decision. The sovereign was the reigning monarch whose authority stood at the center of the institution. Anne met his anger without raising her voice. You asked the crown to approve something before the crown was allowed to examine it. Anne then opened the council file and disclosed what the written objections contained. The proposed position would give Tom access to confidential planning meetings, reaching far beyond food or cultural events. He could be present during discussions involving state visits, official guest lists, security-sensitive schedules, and private diplomatic arrangements. Camilla turned toward Charles. He had described the role to her as limited, practical, and harmless. He had never explained its full reach. Camilla pushed her chair back and stood. For the first time, part of her anger shifted away from Anne and toward her husband. She asked why he had hidden the true authority attached to the appointment. Charles offered no immediate answer. The confidence that had carried him into the room began to collapse under the weight of his own silence. Charles reached toward the warrant. Anne remained seated, watching him carefully, while Camilla waited for a defense that never came. The king touched the paper, then turned it face down. It was not a surrender, but it was the first admission that the proposal could no longer survive unchanged. The meeting ended without agreement, yet the struggle had moved beyond wounded pride and family loyalty. The decisive question now stood outside that room. Could Charles force the appointment through by royal authority, or could the council stop him completely? The answer lay not in affection, seniority, or royal blood, but in the quiet machinery of approval that even a monarch could not ignore without consequence. Royal power often appears absolute from a distance. Inside the palace, it survives through consent, convention, and the willingness of experienced officials to place their names beneath a decision. Charles could order the appointment announced. He could demand that preparations continue. But when the council assembled around a polished table the following morning, the king discovered that authority without institutional support could become isolation, and every empty signature line carried its own warning. Charles entered determined to regain control. The Royal Household Council was the fictional senior body responsible for examining major palace decisions involving security clearance, operational budgets, access to official correspondence, and events connected to government representatives. Its members could not remove the monarch's authority, but they could refuse to support a decision that exposed the institution to financial, legal, or reputational danger. Anne had not canceled the appointment. She had forced it into the light. Her intervention required the king to submit the role's duties, recruitment justification, funding, and conflict of interest protections for formal scrutiny. The Princess Royal sat across from her brother without satisfaction. She knew the review might wound him, but allowing the proposal to pass untested could wound the crown far more deeply. Charles opened the meeting by defending Tom's practical experience. He spoke of the banquet failure, the need for modern thinking, and the value of trusted judgment. Then he stopped. No official immediately supported him. The silence felt less like hesitation and more like refusal. The king's confidence narrowed into disappointment as he realized that his personal certainty had persuaded no one else in the room. William chose his words carefully. He told his father that any role created for a relative would face harsher judgment than an ordinary appointment, especially when public money and sensitive access were involved. The prince did not question Tom's character. He questioned the process. Charles heard something colder. To him, his son's warning sounded like abandonment. At the moment family loyalty mattered most. The council's legal advisor then identified a clause buried inside the appointment draft. It allowed the new advisor to approve external hospitality contracts, meaning Tom could influence which private companies received palace work. Such authority could create accusations of favoritism even without wrongdoing. Anne watched Charles absorb the discovery, while William remained silent beside him. A finance officer delivered the second blow. The proposed office required permanent staff, a travel allowance, security support, administrative space, and an annual operating budget far larger than either Camilla or Tom had been told. Charles read the cost summary, removed his glasses, and placed the paper down. He said nothing. Anne did not celebrate. She understood that her brother was confronting the possibility that his trust had been used to create something far more powerful than he intended. The council suspended the appointment pending a full vote. Charles accepted the ruling without agreement, while William watched him withdraw into silence, and Anne gathered the disputed papers. Within hours, that decision reached Tom. By then, the promised office was no longer an honor. It had become a burden he might never be able to carry. Tom had been measured for access before he had been approved for authority. A temporary office had been discussed. Briefing papers had been assembled. His first weeks had been quietly mapped out by people who assumed the king's wish would become palace reality. Then a senior secretary entered the room, collected the unopened security forms, and informed him that the appointment process had been suspended indefinitely. No accusation was spoken. The silence was worse. Tom arrived at Clarence's house expecting clarification. The royal residence, used by Charles and Camilla for private work and official meetings, had become the place where his imagined future was quietly dismantled. A senior secretary handed him formal notice that the role could not proceed until the council completed its review. His planned introductions were removed. His security clearance was frozen. Every draft reference to his new position was ordered out of internal schedules. Tom held his composure, but the humiliation cut deeply. He told the secretary that he had never asked to see state papers or control palace contracts. He had believed the job concerned cultural events, guest planning, and hospitality. The official listened without judgment, yet that restraint made the moment colder. Tom understood that staff already viewed him as the beneficiary of a decision shaped before scrutiny had begun. Camilla met her son privately after the briefing. She apologized for allowing expectations to grow before the position was secure. The queen expected anger, but his question was quieter and more painful. Had she wanted the appointment because it suited him, or because she needed her family to be accepted inside the institution that had resisted them for so long? She tried to answer, then stopped. Tom saw that even she was no longer certain. Tom disclosed the promise through his recorded account of a private conversation with Charles. The king had told him the role was settled in principle, meaning the main decision had supposedly been made, even though final approval remained unfinished. That assurance had encouraged him to attend early briefings and consider how the office might function. Now it proved that confidence had been offered before the council had been given a voice. Camilla learned something worse from the internal schedule placed before them. One palace department had already started treating Tom as an incoming superior. Staff had redirected questions toward him, delayed decisions while awaiting his arrival, and quietly resented authority he did not yet possess. The queen understood the damage immediately. Even a revised appointment would now carry suspicion, bitterness, and the appearance of favor. Tom left without demanding that Charles defend him. An attendant removed his name from a provisional office card outside a small second-floor room. He noticed the blank holder, paused for half a second, and continued walking. He would not allow the palace to witness the full weight of his disappointment. Camilla watched her son leave and finally recognized the truth Anne had feared. Forcing the role forward would not rescue Tom. It would trap him inside a controversy that could define him for years. Yet Charles had turned the appointment into a test of his kingship, and persuading him to surrender it would require more than procedure. That choice would come when husband and wife faced each other alone, stripped of advisors and unable to hide behind the crown. That evening, Camilla found Charles alone with the appointment papers spread across a table. He expected her to demand that he fight. Instead, she closed the folder. For the first time since Anne's intervention, the Queen spoke not as Tom's mother defending an opportunity, but as the king's wife confronting the cost of pride. She told Charles that saving the appointment would no longer protect her son. It would permanently define him as the beneficiary of royal favor. Charles looked at the unsigned warrant between them and refused to accept defeat. The warrant was the formal document that would have authorized Tom's role and given it royal force. No aides waited outside. No council member could interrupt. The king insisted that withdrawing the proposal would make him appear weak and prove that Anne could overrule him whenever she disliked a personal decision. Camilla did not defend her sister-in-law's manner, but she defended the warning. She told Charles that Anne had not created the crisis. Secrecy had. The Queen admitted she wanted Tom's ability to be recognized, especially after years of watching her family remain outside palace life. Yet she no longer wanted that recognition purchased through suspicion, resentment, or rules quietly moved aside. Charles finally confessed what the appointment had meant to him. He had wanted to prove that he could protect Camilla's family from being treated as permanent outsiders. The monarch believed giving Tom a meaningful place would show that acceptance was real, not merely spoken about at formal occasions. She understood the love behind that decision, but she also saw its danger. Protection, she told him, could never mean placing her son above the standards imposed on everyone else. Camilla then disclosed what Tom had told her during their private conversation at Clarence House. Her son intended to decline the role even if the council approved a narrower version. He had no wish to enter the palace beneath a cloud of favoritism or become a symbol of influence he had never demanded. Charles stared at her, stunned. The person he had prepared to fight for had already stepped away. Charles felt the argument collapse inside him. Continuing the battle would no longer defend Tom, help Camilla, or improve the household. It would protect only the king's wounded authority. The truth was painful, because Anne's intervention had challenged him, but his own pride now threatened to prolong the damage. Camilla pushed the warrant toward him. Charles picked up the same pen Anne had stopped before it touched the page. For several seconds, he held it without moving. Then the king drew one line through the appointment heading and wrote a single word beneath it: withdrawn. Camilla released a breath she had been holding all evening. Charles did not look relieved. He looked diminished, yet clearer than before. Husband and wife had settled the family conflict, but they could not contain its consequences. By morning, the abandoned appointment would escape beyond the palace gates. What began as a silent struggle around one royal desk now moved into public view, where a single headline would turn private restraint into a national argument about privilege and duty. By sunrise, the appointment was no longer private. News desks abandoned their planned front pages. Broadcasters opened with the language of palace revolt. Outside Buckingham Palace, tourists raised phones toward television crews, while royal supporters argued across the barriers. Yet one image defined the entire morning: a newspaper showing Anne's unsmiling face beside an empty signature line, beneath a headline declaring that the Princess Royal had stopped a family favor from becoming royal policy. The London Standard led with words designed to wound. Anne draws the line, palace roll for Queen's son withdrawn. Its morning edition called the abandoned appointment a test of whether royal relatives could gain influence without open scrutiny. That mattered because the monarchy depended on public trust, and even the appearance of nepotism, the use of power to benefit family, could make every future palace decision seem suspect. A national broadcaster framed the crisis as a clash between Charles's personal discretion and the crown's duty to remain above favoritism. Supporters of the king argued that the sovereign should be trusted to choose capable advisors. They said Tom had been humiliated despite never receiving the office, exercising its authority, or spending a penny of public money. To them, Charles had tried to modernize the household and had been punished for trusting someone he knew. Anne's defenders answered with equal force. They praised her for protecting her brother from a decision that could have damaged his reign. Critics, however, accused the Princess Royal of weakening the monarch through an internal struggle she had allowed to become public. The same intervention was described as courage by one side and disloyalty by the other. Anne became the center of a victory she had never asked to claim. The palace then issued a formal statement. A formal statement was an authorized public message carrying the institution's official position. It confirmed that the proposed role had been withdrawn and announced that all future senior household appointments would require documented council review. The words sounded controlled, but their meaning was explosive. The rules had changed because one royal decision had come too close to crossing a dangerous line. Tom responded through a brief written statement released by his representative. He supported the withdrawal and said he had never wished to accept a role that might weaken confidence in the royal household. His restraint drew sympathy, but it also confirmed how deeply the controversy had affected him. He was defending an institution that had already removed his name from its plans. At the Victoria Memorial, a small crowd gathered behind a live broadcast. One elderly supporter lifted the newspaper, tapped Anne's photograph, and told the reporter, "That is what family loyalty looks like when it is difficult." Others nearby disagreed, but the sentence traveled across broadcasts within minutes. Anne watched the coverage alone at Gatcombe Park. She heard herself described as victorious, then turned off the television. The Princess Royal felt no triumph. She had never wanted Charles diminished, Camilla shamed, or Tom exposed. She had wanted only to stop one decision before it damaged them all. The appointment was gone, and the rules had been rewritten. The final question was no longer who had won, but what each person had sacrificed to preserve the monarchy. The last word belonged not to the loudest headline, but to the private consequences left behind after the palace doors closed and the institution counted the true cost of the decision. The appointment ended with no ceremony. There was no public dismissal because Tom had never formally entered the role. There was no royal victory because Anne took no pleasure in stopping her brother. There was only an unsigned warrant, a rewritten appointments policy, and 4 people forced to confront the distance between love and entitlement. In preventing one controversial decision, the family preserved the crown, but they also exposed the wounds created whenever personal loyalty is mistaken for public authority. The Royal Household Council formally closed the proposal and confirmed that the senior advisor position would not be created in its original form. The council was the senior body responsible for reviewing sensitive palace decisions involving money, access, and official authority. Its final ruling went further than one cancelled appointment. Every future senior role would now require an independent job description, financial review, conflict of interest screening, and formal approval before any candidate could be approached. Charles met Anne privately after the decision became official. The king did not offer an emotional apology, nor did his sister demand one. He admitted that her intervention had prevented the appointment from being announced before its true cost was understood. His words were restrained, but they restored something the confrontation had nearly destroyed: respect between a brother who had felt challenged and a sister who had refused to remain silent. Anne told Charles she had never acted against him. The Princess Royal had acted because the sovereign, the reigning monarch entrusted with protecting the institution, should never be left alone with a decision capable of weakening the crown. He finally understood that she had not tried to steal his authority. She had forced him to protect it from his own personal loyalty. Camilla spoke with Tom after the withdrawal became final. The Queen told her son that his worth could never depend on a palace title. He answered that refusing the role might be the first choice in the entire affair that truly belonged to him. She felt the sadness beneath his calm, yet she also heard relief. Tom had lost an appointment, but he had escaped becoming a permanent symbol of royal favor. Tom returned the unopened briefing case without complaint. Camilla watched him leave without guards, staff, or ceremonial access. She regretted the humiliation he had suffered, but she no longer wanted him trapped inside a struggle over legitimacy. By stepping away, he recovered control of the reputation others had nearly defined for him. Charles placed the cancelled warrant inside the council archive, rather than destroying it. The archive was the protected record where official palace decisions were preserved for future reference. Anne stood beside him as the file was sealed. The document would remain as proof of a boundary the monarchy had approached, but ultimately refused to cross. Anne's intervention had not been rebellion. It had been disciplined loyalty. Charles's withdrawal had not been surrender. It was an acceptance that royal authority grows stronger when it answers to standards beyond personal affection. Camilla lost the chance to bring her son into the palace, yet protected him from suspicion. Tom lost a title, yet regained his independence. And when the file was finally sealed, the verdict was complete. The monarchy survived, because duty stood above family, and the king honored the boundary his sister had refused to let him cross. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.